Uncovered my best friend's obsession with my dad through her diary. Now I'm torn between revealing the truth or staying silent. She and I have been best friends since we were kids, practically sisters, with our parents closer than any neighbors could be. When my mom passed away at 15, she was by my side every step, always steady, always the mature one while I let my wild side rule my love life. She was private and low-key about every guy she dated. Nothing lasted, nothing even memorable. But everything started changing around the time she left for college. I started noticing how differently she acted around my dad. At first, there was nothing obvious to suspect, it could have been anything. She began bringing him dinner after work every week, which was thoughtful but a little unusual, and as months rolled by, the change grew more obvious. I watched her show up at our house in clothes I thought were completely inappropriate for being around my dad. Instead of bringing over those dinners while I was home, she started picking nights when I was gone to do it purposefully, it seemed. And my dad? Since my mom died, he hasn't even tried dating. I always thought he was afraid my brother or I would judge him if he did. But neither of us wanted him to wither away alone. We made sure he knew we didn't expect that from him. He was always so faithful, so devoted, his happiness really mattered to us. Then, I'll admit it, I crossed a line I know I can't uncross. I was a terrible friend. I knew for years where she kept her online diary, always with her cat's name as the password, and this time, my curiosity betrayed me. I snooped. I felt disgusting for it, but I did it anyway. What I found confirmed everything that had unsettled me. She's obsessed with my dad. She's been obsessed for years. Suddenly it all made sense why none of her relationships lasted, why she always seemed so unavailable emotionally. Reading her thoughts about my own father made me queasy. He's my dad. She used to stay at our house when she was just a preteen, with my mom there. Seeing her write about her feelings for him, it made my skin crawl. The diary got more upsetting 2 weeks ago. She wrote about how she'd started talking to him about more personal feelings, and that he finally opened up to her, but I have no idea if it actually happened or if it is just her fantasy. Maybe it's just vivid daydreams, maybe not. For context, my dad is 38, he was only 19 when he had me. Now I'm completely torn inside. I know what I know no matter how I found out, and no matter how wrong it was to look, I can't unsee it. I can't look at her the same way. If she ever found out I peeked, she'd be raging mad at me, and I get it. But I'm lost. It all weirds me out, but on another level, I believe she truly would love and care for my dad if anything did come from it. I have no clue if my dad knows about her feelings, or even suspects. So do I say anything to her to encourage it, to discourage it, or do I just keep my mouth shut and pretend I know nothing? I honestly don't know what to do. She was terrified, kept saying how much I must hate her and how our friendship was ruined. I assured her, over and over, that nothing like that would ever happen. We ended up having the biggest, most drawn-out, girl talk crying session in history. Honestly, it probably would have looked ridiculous to anyone watching. She admitted she feels guilty about my mother, like she's betraying her memory, and that got me crying too. It was a mess, yet it felt cathartic to let all of it out together. Now, after hours of talking, here's where things stand. According to her, my dad has absolutely no idea. She's too scared to approach him because he's friends with her parents, which just complicates everything. I told her in no uncertain terms that I would never tolerate her playing with my dad's heart or emotions, but I also told her I truly believe her feelings are genuine, that this really isn't just some silly crush. And here's where things somehow get even weirder. She wants me to talk to my dad for her to sort of test the waters just to find out if he'd even be interested. As if this whole thing isn't weird enough already. But I agreed. She needs to know one way or another, and I do think my saying something will make it less awkward for her in the future if things don't work out. Am I totally okay with any of this? I'm working on it. She's been there for me through everything, and yeah, it's weird, but maybe a lot less weird than dad eventually bringing home someone news that I'd have to learn to either like or hate. I told her I'd start calling her stepmom from now on, just to make her feel old. That got us both laughing through the tears. We have a long way to go, but at least everything's out in the open now. Update. Shoo. Last night after dinner, while Dad and I were clearing the table, I casually asked him how his week had gone. Then, almost as a test, I asked if Lori, not her real name, had brought him dinner this week. He answered yes, so the moment just felt right and I decided to stop beating around the bush. I looked at him and said, "You do know that Lori likes you a lot more than just as a friend, right?" Honestly, I braced myself for him to deny it, or maybe laugh it off, something along those lines. Instead, he just looked at me and said, "I'm not an idiot." That response took me by surprise. I really didn't want to open up the floor to a whole conversation about whether or not he's interested in her. So I just let him know how I felt. I told him, if you're holding back from being with her because of either me or Brian, not really my brother's name, you don't have to worry. We both know about her feelings for you, and neither of us has a problem with it. He just nodded and said okay, nothing more. The fact that he didn't brush it off or crack a joke or act surprised makes me think he's at least interested, though I can only guess. Before I had this conversation with him, I ran it by my brother. He told me he suspected something was going on, too. The only thing he admitted was kind of grossing him out was the idea that if Lori and Dad ended up together, he would have once had impure thoughts about his stepmom. Honestly made me laugh. He's always been a bit of a perv. I'd actually caught him once, years ago in high school, peeking at Lori when she stayed over and was changing. But that was years ago, and he has a girlfriend now. Knowing my brother, there'll probably be a lot more in his future. After talking with Dad, I reached out to Lori and told her what had happened and what I'd said. I made it clear I didn't ask him out or anything for her, I just let him know about her feelings. I also told her he didn't flinch. That was that. Now whatever happens next is fully between the two of them. She said she was going to talk to him today. I just hope neither of them gets hurt. I truly love both of them, but at the end of the day, he's my dad, and my loyalty will always be with him. Update 3. This didn't take long at all. Lori went to see my dad and took him his dinner, like she often does, and told me beforehand that she was going to have a real conversation with him. It absolutely didn't go her way. She's pretty crushed, but my dad was as kind and gentle as he could possibly be about the whole thing. I spent the whole night trying to comfort her, reassuring her that she will get through this, even though right now she's heartbroken. In case anyone is wondering, Lori told me that my dad said he thinks of her as a daughter. He told her she's beautiful, but not in a romantic way, just in the way a father sees a daughter. He spent a lot of time making sure she didn't feel embarrassed or awkward about her feelings, trying to comfort her and keep things from feeling strange between them. I really do feel sorry for her. It's clear to me that this isn't something she just dreamed up on a whim, she'd been feeling this way for a while. But I can't deny it, I am so much more relieved than anything else that this is how it ended. I had been bracing myself for the possibility that things could go a different direction, and honestly, this outcome is so much easier to navigate for all of us. I genuinely hope, for both of their sakes, that each of them eventually finds someone right for them. Update 4. I'm so angry I can barely type this out. I feel utterly betrayed, used, and honestly sick to my stomach over all of it. This is such complete bullshit. Weeks ago, I felt something was off, I even mentally braced myself for the possibility that something might happen. But both of them looked me in the eye and promised me nothing would. Fucking liars. Both of them. There is absolutely no feeling on earth worse than walking in on your father and your best friend involved in the act. My mind just broke apart in that moment. I wanted to tear her hair out when I saw her there. The disgust rushed over me so hard, all I could do was turn around and get the hell out of that house. Later, my brother told me he suspected something was still happening because she wouldn't stop coming around. That just made everything worse. I hate her right now, I really do. After everything we talked about, how she told me she was moving on, how we tried to clear the air, how the hell could she do this to me? And him, my dad, the one who was supposed to be the adult and protect me from crap like this, he acted all mature, like he was going to end things, and the next thing I know I have to see something no daughter should ever have to see her father do, especially not with her best friend. I can't hate him. He's my father. But I'll be damned if I'm not so unbelievably pissed at him right now. Every time I think about it, it feels like the world is tilting under my feet. Update 5. I didn't go home the first night. I drove without thinking and ended up in the Target parking lot, engine off, hands locked around the steering wheel until my fingers went numb. When I could finally make my body move again, I called Brian. He came and found me where I was, climbed into the passenger seat and didn't say anything at first. He just sat there while I ugly cried into my hoodie like a child. When I could breathe again, he asked if I wanted to stay at his place. I did. We went by the house so I could grab clothes and toiletries. Dad's truck was still in the driveway. I asked Brian to come inside with me. I don't know what I was expecting, but the first thing I saw in the entryway was a plate with a fork on it and a glass of wine with lipstick I recognized. I wanted to throw it against the wall. I didn't. I went straight to my room and started ripping things off hangers and stuffing them into a duffel without really seeing. I guess the noise gave me away because Dad appeared in the doorway. He had changed. His hair was damp like he'd washed his face, and realized too late that soap can't fix this. He said my name the same way he did when I broke my wrist in 6th grade, soft, like he was holding his breath for the worst. I told him not to say a word. He said he was sorry anyway. Then he tried to tell me it wasn't what I think, and I laughed out loud in a way that didn't even sound like me. Brian stepped between us and told him to move. Dad did. Lori was not there. I didn't ask where she was. On the way out, I stopped and took my mom's photo off the hallway table. It's the one where she is wearing that stupid floppy sun hat and grinning with her whole face. I took it without thinking. Dad noticed and didn't try to stop me. I slept on Brian's lumpy couch with my mom's picture face down on my chest because I couldn't look at her either. By morning my phone was a slot machine. 10 missed calls from Dad, texts stacked on top of each other in a blur, 3 voicemails from Lori that were just my name, followed by sobbing and then hanging up. I blocked both of them. Then I unblocked Dad to tell him I would come by when he wasn't there to get the rest of my things. He said okay, and asked if he could just see me and explain. I said no. He sent I love you with a heart he never uses. I put the phone face down again and stared at Brian's ceiling fan until it felt like I might throw up. I didn't tell myself I was being noble when I drove to Lori's parents' house. I didn't feel noble. I felt vicious and sick and like I was betraying someone I used to know by telling the people who raised her exactly what their daughter had done. But I did it. Her mom opened the door and hugged me like always and I almost lost my nerve, and then I didn't. I watched her face fall in pieces while I talked. She kept saying, no, that's. She wouldn't, and I kept answering, she did. Her dad came in halfway through and looked like he aged a decade in a minute. He didn't say anything. He just picked up his keys and left. Her mom asked me to please go, and I did. Half an hour later Lori was at Brian's door, because I never changed the habit of telling her where I am when things are bad. Old muscle memory. I didn't invite her in. She stood on the doormat with her hair straight back and no makeup and a sweatshirt I recognized from 100 sleepovers, and I hated that I recognized all of it. She kept saying she was sorry, and it kept sounding smaller every time she said it, like a word repeated until it doesn't mean anything. She told me it wasn't planned, that they had been talking after the night he said no to be sure things wouldn't be weird, and that it just happened. I told her nothing just happens, people choose. She said she knows. I asked her why she lied to my face. She said because if she told me the truth she would lose me, and she didn't want to. I told her she'd lost me anyway. She started crying harder. I shut the door. If the story ended there, I could probably harden myself into something flat and get through it. But it didn't. This afternoon Lori texted me from a number I didn't have saved because I'd blocked her. It was one sentence, I think I'm late. I stared at the words for a long time until Brian glanced over and said my name. I typed so? Because I was trying to be stoned. Then she sent 4 more messages so fast my phone buzzed like it was shorting out. She said there was a condom, it broke, and she didn't notice until afterward. She said she didn't know who else to go to because her mom had just told her to find somewhere else to stay for a while and she was at a motel near the interstate and she was scared. She said she wasn't asking me for anything except maybe just to sit outside the bathroom door while she took a test because she couldn't bear to look at it alone. I want to tell you I didn't go. I wanted it to be true. I even told Brian I wasn't going. Then I found myself in the pharmacy aisle, hands shaking, staring at a wall of tiny pink boxes, thinking about the morning after my first real breakup when Lori dragged me here and stowed with me while I cried over nothing in front of shelves of shampoo, how she didn't let me leave until I bought ridiculous glitter nail polish and a frozen lasagna. I bought 2 tests and drove to the motel without even texting that I was coming, because if I told her I was coming that would make it real. She opened the door and it was like stepping into a version of us I didn't know. Lori on a patterned bedspread that smelled like bleach and cigarettes, hair in a knot, the bravest girl I ever met looking like she'd been scraped hollow. I put the tests on the cheap desk and sat on the floor outside the bathroom while she read the instructions twice like I always do. She cracked the door and asked me not to leave. I did. There are small sounds that will live in your bones forever. The click of a cap. The shuffle of cardboard in a trash can. The stupid little beep from the microwave clock that must have been set all wrong. Then, nothing. We waited. We didn't talk. I could hear her breathe and it sounded like both of us. When the timer on her phone went off, she said my name once, in a voice I've never heard from her before. I stood up even though my legs didn't want to. I pushed the door open. She was sitting on the edge of the tub, her shoulder shaking, the test on the sink. I looked down at it because I had to, because whatever it said would snap our whole world from one shape into another, and there it was. 2 lines. Clear as a siren. Update 6. I didn't say anything clever or strong when I saw those 2 lines. My mouth went dry and my hands did the pins and needles thing like they weren't attached right. Lori made a sound that wasn't even a word and folded it on herself on the edge of the tub like she'd been cut in half at the waist. I picked up the second test and shoved it into her hand and made my voice steady enough to say, "Do the other one." We waited all over again, the world holding its breath with us, and then there were 2 more lines, colder somehow just for being expected. I don't know when the part of my brain that hurts turned off and the part that organizes took over. I opened my phone, typed in our zip code and women's clinic, and I found one that took walk-ins in the morning. I made us an appointment anyway, 8:30, because if we didn't make a time it felt like the day might dissolve and take us with it. I texted Brian and told him I was with her and not to worry unless I said otherwise. He sent back a thumbs up and a heart and then, 5 minutes later, "Do you need me?" I stared at that for a long time and typed "not yet." I typed a different message and deleted it 3 times before I sent it to my dad. "She's pregnant. That's all." I added the clinic's name and nothing else. My thumb hovered over the block button out of habit, but I didn't push it. He replied faster than I thought human thumbs can move. "Where are you?" Then, right under it, "I'm on my way." I didn't sleep that night. Lori did in snatches. The motel's air conditioner rattled like a loose bicycle chain and every time the unit kicked on she startled and then smoothed her face out like she wasn't going to cry again in front of me. At 5 I went to the vending machine and got ginger ale and a Kit Kat because I didn't know what else to do with my body if it wasn't handing someone a drink and breaking chocolate in half. She took the soda and held it against her cheek like an ice pack. The clinic smelled like lemon cleaner and coffee and there was a TV in the corner playing a cooking show with the sound off. The woman at the front desk gave us a packet of forms and a clipboard, and every question felt like a trick. Emergency contact. I wrote my name and my number and my hand shook like I was forging something illegal. An older woman in scrubs called Lori's name and we both looked up like students hearing the bell. Dad wasn't there yet. I told her I'd be right outside. She nodded and disappeared, the door doing that soft close thing like in fancy kitchens. He came in 5 minutes later, hair damp like he'd put water on it with his hands in the parking lot to look less pulled apart. He saw me, he saw the empty chair beside me, and for a second his face went white in this awful teenage way, like he was the one who had been caught somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. He sat. I could feel the distance between our elbows like a wall. He said my name and then, quieter, "I'm so," and I cut him off with my hand without looking at him. "Not now." The television flipped to a different recipe. A woman on the screen was smiling while she salted something. I wanted to walk up and turn it off and carry it into the parking lot and leave it under a tire. A nurse with kind eyes and sneakers that squeaked came out roughly forever later and said, "She asked if you could come back." My legs were heavy and floating at the same time when I stood. Dad's knee bumped my bag when I passed and I didn't know if that was an accident because he's tall or because I'm his kid and we don't know where to put our bones, anymore. The room was small and warm and had posters on the wall with fruit on them that were actually drawings of embryos, which is a thing I didn't realize until I was staring at them on paper and trying not to throw up. Lori was sitting in a chair with a disposable blanket across her lap and she had that brave face on that everyone mistook for calm when we were kids. The nurse went through all the words. Pregnant. Options. Resources. Timelines. She talked like a person who knows the worst day of your life is just her Tuesday and respects it anyway. Lori nodded at all the right places and shook her head when she didn't want a pamphlet. She signed a thing. They drew blood. They did a test that made her wings and I squeezed her hand. When the ultrasound tech came in, Dad stood halfway and the nurse said, gently but in a way that broke exactly zero argument, "Let's keep it to one support person," and his mouth opened and shut. He sat back down. I didn't look at him to see what his face did after that because I didn't want to know if it was relief. They did the internal ultrasound. The screen was turned a little away, and then the tech angled it. There was a great oval with a darker speck inside it. Nothing you would write home about if home still meant what it used to. The tech measured something and typed numbers. "Looks like about 5 weeks," she said, like she was telling us the weather. She didn't offer to print a picture. Lori didn't ask for one. Neither did I. The nurse asked if there was a partner we should involve in the conversation about next steps, and there was a beat where you could feel the word catch in both our throats. Lori said, "He's here." The nurse looked at her face and then at mine and just nodded and said, "Okay." We walked out into sunshine that felt like a personal attack. Dad stood up so fast the chair legs squeaked on the tile. He looked at Lori first and then at me, like he wasn't sure which landmine had the shorter fuse. Lori's mouth trembled once and then her chin went up in that stubborn way I know too well. She said it out loud. "I'm pregnant." His shoulders dropped like someone had been holding a string pulled taut from his spine. He said her name, and then, whatever you decide, I'm here. I will take care of it. Of you. His voice cracked on the last word. I wanted to tell him he didn't get to say we about anything anymore, and then I realized I'd been thinking we for the last hour without even noticing. Lori looked at me and then at him and said she needed air. We stepped outside. It was one of those spring days that tricks you into thinking it's warmer than it is. Cars hissed past on wet pavement even though it hadn't rained. Dad followed and stood a respectful distance like we were birds that would fly off. I told him, without looking away from Lori, that there was no more hiding in kitchens after this. He nodded and said he knows. I said we tell her parents tonight. He almost said something about sparing them a little more time and then caught himself and just said, I'll call. I'll apologize. And then stopped because there isn't a verb for fixing a thing this huge and stupid besides the boring ones like show up and pay and sit in the dark when the other person cries and don't make it about you. Lori's mother opened the door herself. Her eyes were smaller than usual like she hadn't slept either. Her dad was there too, sitting at the dining room table like it was court. The table had a bowl of fruit in the middle that didn't look real. Lori stood in the doorway and didn't move in, and for a second I thought this is it. This is where everything breaks completely and never gets put in any kind of shape again. Then her mother crossed the space between them and reached for her and pulled her in and wrapped her up so tight I could hear both of them breathing. She didn't look at my dad. She pretended he was a piece of furniture you walk around to keep from stubbing your toe. Her father did not pretend. He pushed his chair back slow and deliberate and planted himself between my dad and the inside of the house like he was a bouncer. He said my dad's name like it was poison in his mouth. He said, "Get out." Dad didn't move. He started with "I am so sorry, this is my fault," and got to "I will be responsible," and Lori's dad took one step closer and didn't raise his voice, which was worse. "Get out." Dad looked at me like he was asking permission to leave his own shame. I didn't give him anything. He put his hands up, palms out, that tired gesture people do when they think it makes bullets pass through them easier, and he stepped back onto the porch. Before he could close the door behind him he said to Lori, not to the room, "Text me what you would decide." He didn't try to touch her. He didn't even touch the railing. He walked down the steps like his knees hurt. Inside, Lori's mother finally looked at me like she was just remembering I was attached to any of this. Her face did this war between fury and gratitude, and then she sat Lori down and put her hands on both sides of her face and said her name in a way that made me want to cry again, not because it was sad but because it was so clean. Lori took a breath that tried to be steady and failed and sat it and watched both of her parents take the hit. Her mom's hand slid from her cheek to her shoulder and stayed there. Her dad didn't sit back down. He leaned on the back of the chair with both hands and stared at the bowl of fake-looking fruit like it had personal responsibility. We didn't get into what ifs right then. Lori said she wanted to think and talk to a counselor and sleep without the motel air screaming at her. Her mother said, "You're not staying there," like it was the easiest math problem in the world. She told her to go get her bag. Lori asked if that was really okay, and her mother said, "I'm angry and I'm embarrassed and I still want to choke him, and you are my baby. You come home." Her dad didn't agree out loud, but he didn't say no either. He didn't look at anyone for a long time, and when he finally did, his face was just tired. "If you keep it," he said, very careful, like he was stepping around glass, "we figure it out. If you don't, we figure it out. But you don't see him again," and he looked at me for the first time then, and his eyes asked me if that was possible. I told him I didn't have an answer for that anymore. On the way back to the motel to get her stuff, we hit every red light. Lori's phone buzzed in her hoodie pocket. She didn't look. Mine buzzed too. A text from Dad that said, "I told Brian I need to talk. He wants to meet tonight." I stared at it until Lori said, "Are you going?" And I realized the text was to me, not to the universe. I typed, "You can say whatever you need to say to him without me there," and sent it. He replied, "Okay." Then, "I'm sorry," again, the word worn out and tender like a band-aid that's lost all its stick. Lori's motel room smelled more like cigarettes than before now that her mother's perfume was still in my nose. We shoved everything into her duffel. I snagged the empty pink test box out of the trash because I couldn't stand the idea of the cleaning person lifting it like an archaeological find later, and put it in a bag like it was hazardous waste. Lori stood in the doorway with a key card in her hand and looked at the bedspread like it had been a person who'd watched something. She shut the door without looking back. "I haven't been home. I don't know if I will, at least not for a while." Dad asked if he could come by Brian's after their talk to see me, and I told him no. I told him I'll text him when I'm ready to hear him say out loud all the things he couldn't keep in. He sent back "understood," which is a word people use when they want you to think they're calm. I don't know what I'm feeling besides an awful double helix of protective and furious braided so tight it makes my stomach hurt. I brought the photo of my mom out of my bag and put it face up, this time on Brian's coffee table. The floppy sun hat is ridiculous in a way that made both of us look at it and exhale like we were trying to remember how. I don't think there's a way to make this not ugly in places. I do think there might be a way to make sure Lori isn't alone inside the ugliest parts. If there's a heartbeat in a few weeks, I'll hear it whether I'm in the room or not. For now I'm the name on the line that says who they call if something goes wrong, and that's a sentence I never thought I would write about my father's almost baby with my best friend. It sits in my mouth strange, like a new piercing you keep touching with your tongue and then pretending you didn't. Update 7. Brian came back from meeting Dad with the kind of look you don't say anything to first. He dropped his keys in that way where they hit the bowl too hard and bounce out. There was a raw place across his knuckles like he'd tried to punch a wall and the wall had better technique. I asked if he was okay and he said yeah, and then, after a second, no, and went to take a shower that was too hot and too long and did not fix a single atom in the air. The bleeding started the next afternoon. Lori texted me a photo of her palm with 3 rust-red smears and my body went cold in a crispy, practical way that reminded me of the minute during a car accident when you stop hearing sound. I called her, she picked up on the second ring and said, "Don't freak out, already crying." I was at Brian's stupid dining table pretending to look at a textbook. I was in my car with the seatbelt still beeping before she finished the sentence. The year was the kind that shares a parking lot with a strip mall and has a sign that tries to be comforting by being all lowercase. I half carried her past a guy with his hand wrapped in a dish towel and a woman holding a toddler sticky with red popsicle. They gave her a plastic bracelet and took her vitals and did the gentle, bored question voice about how much and how often and whether she felt lightheaded. I told the intake nurse her LMP because she couldn't get the date right through the teeth of sobbing. We sat in chairs that had the give of an old flip-flop. The TV in the corner was on a home renovation show. A couple on the screen smiled at a wall somebody knocked down. I wanted to stand on our side of the screen and push the studs back into place until they clicked. Dad texted twice, then 3 times. Lori looked at me over the top of the clipboard and said, "Small, could you tell him we're here?" I didn't like the feel of my thumbs typing his name into the same device that had my grocery list. He replied immediately. "Humming." I told her, "Okay," and she nodded and folded her hands in her lap like she was trying to make them stop existing. They took her back pretty fast, bleeding bys, due speed. A nurse with a sunflower pin led us down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria broccoli. Dad appeared at the sliding doors like he'd run there, breath fogging when he exhaled even though it wasn't cold. He looked at Lori first, at her sweatshirt, at the way she was hunched like you do when you're holding your own insides together. He started to say her name and the nurse said gently, "Let's keep it to one person for now," and I felt his eyes hit me like a thrown penny asking for luck. Lori squeezed my wrist, picked, and I went in with her. There are sounds in hospitals that hit a pitch you don't notice until the room is quiet and then you hear them in every muscle. The ultrasound machine warming up is one. She changed into the thin gown and lay back and stared at the acoustic tile like she was trying to count every dot so her heart would stay in her chest. The tech had nails painted the color of toothpaste and a voice that knew how not to make promises. The jelly was cold. Lori flinched. The tech said sorry, and traced an ellipse like someone outlining a pond on a map with their finger. The screen did that snowed a picture change that never takes as long on TV. First it was a galaxy of static, then moony gray, then there it was a little black oval where the tech nodded like she'd been rooting for it. She toggled something and a brighter speck inside flickered. It wasn't dramatic, just a tremor, a moth behind thick glass. She turned a dial and a sound came through the speaker tinny and fast and all wrong for how slow the moment felt. A blip blip blip, high as a watch alarm, insistent as someone tapping a pen on a desk. "Hello, hello, hello." The tech said, "Cardiac activity present. Around 112, like she was commenting on the weather again." Lori's hand came searching for mine and found it like a plant finds the part of the window with the most light. I didn't realize I was crying until the tech handed me a tissue and I took it without having to be told which end was up. She measured a crescent-shaped smudge near the sac and said subchorionic hemorrhage and wrote it down like a spelling bee champion. She said common, and no lifting, and pelvic rest, which is one of those phrases that sounds like it should come with perfume and in fact means don't have sex, don't stake anything up there, don't tempt gravity. She said, "You'll likely spot. It can't be okay." She did not print a picture. Lori didn't ask. I was glad she didn't. The screen went dark when she pushed a button and the room felt loud without the sound of something tiny insisting on itself. When we came back out, Dad stood up so fast the chair scudded back into the wall and thunked. He wasn't the only person waiting. There was a teenager asleep with her mouth open over a t-shirt that said camp something and a man in hunting camo with a bandaged ear, but he moved like the room was only for us. Lori's mother was suddenly there too, hair up, keys clenched in that ready to stab way that proved nothing except you don't know what else to do with your fingers. Lori's father did not come in. He sat on a bench in the wing just outside the automatic doors like a guard dog you can't argue with. Lori's mother did not look at my father. The nurse said the words again for the room and I watched them try to land, the way you can see snowflakes stick to a coat sleeve and melt in order. Brian showed up after a text I hadn't sent him. I guess his dad did. He clocked Dad in 3 seconds and walked not at him but toward the space in the world that had Dad in it. He didn't raise a fist. He pushed him, hard, shoulders flat to the glass, and the whole automatic door yawned and then hiccuped itself back into place like someone's mouth closing on a swallow. It made a comedy slide suite that felt obscene. Security materialized with the bored confidence of a man who has said you can't do that so many times it no longer belongs to any language. Brian said, under his breath and too close to before anyone else, "You broke everything," and Dad said quiet and stupid and not enough I know. He didn't swing. The guard told them both to take it outside, which was hilarious because we were already half there. The doctor came, the one with the neat hair and tired eyes, and said threat phrases that had the shape of comfort without the architecture. Threatened miscarriage. Bleeding can happen. Progesterone levels pending. Come back in 48 hours for labs. No running, no lifting, no nothing. Rest. Hydrate. Watch. She looked at her computer and then at Lori's face and softened by a degree you could measure with bit instruments. Call if it gets heavier than a pad an hour, she said, and handed us a white sheet of paper with black words on it like those could control anything. When she said pelvic rest, Lori's mother looked straight ahead like she was counting the ceiling tiles again, and Dad flinched half an inch like someone had spoken his name. We walked out into a sky that was blue in a misleading way. The kind that makes you remember popsicles and automatically start to do math about summer when you don't get to do that kind of math anymore. Lori's father stood up when he saw us and looked only at Lori. He didn't ask to see paperwork. He didn't ask for numbers. He put his hand out and she went to him like a rope had pulled her in a straight line. He didn't even have to move his feet. He put his arm around her shoulders and turned her toward the parking lot, and I watched a lifetime of muscle memory write itself in his neck and jaw and thought, okay, there are a few things in the world that still know what they're doing. Dad stood on the medical building side of the painted curb and didn't cross it. He looked at me and opened his mouth and I shook my head because if he said sorry again I would have taken the word between my fingers and snapped it like a twig and then shoved the pieces down a drain. He closed his mouth. He put his hands in his pockets like he was worried about his hands. We went back to Lori's parents' house because where else was there? Her mother made toast in the way only mothers can't make toast into a spell. Lori held half of it and didn't bite. She sat with the blanket her grandmother crocheted clutched so high it made a hood. Twice she started to say a sentence and stopped with a little sound like someone finding a closed door in the dark. Later, in her room that still has the bookshelf we built in 9th grade with uneven brackets, she said, not to anyone in particular, I don't know if I can do it, and then again, 10 minutes later, I don't know if I can not. Nobody told her what to decide. The house did that late afternoon sun stripe on the carpet thing and we all ignored it. Dad texted me from a number that has lived in my phone since I was 10 with a dinosaur emoji next to it because Brian thought that was hilarious once. He said, please let me know when the labs are. I can cover anything she needs, and then on a second text, I heard the heartbeat, like he was checking whether he was allowed to use the same words as me about the same sound. I didn't answer. I put my mom's picture on the edge of Lori's dresser, and for one idiotic second it looked like my mother was about to say something useful about subchorionic hematomas and pelvic rest and fathers who set themselves on fire and call it a porch light. We went back to the clinic 2 days later and I handed over her arm like I was renting it out for blood draws. We watched the numbers post into a portal made for people who are not 20 and not stupid and not on the floor of their childhood bedroom with a heating pad and a bucket of Gatorade. The numbers doubled. The nurse called them reassuring. She said, let's schedule a follow-up ultrasound in a week and a half, and I said, okay, with my mouth and please, 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 with a part of my body that talks to doors and machines and luck. Lori nodded. She tasted a cracker and made a face like her skin didn't fit right and then put the cracker back into the sleeve uneaten. Her mother stood in the doorway holding herself, like she'd learned a new religion overnight where you pray by staying upright. That night Dad left a package on Brian's doormat even though I told him not to come by. Brown paper, tidy tape, my name in his handwriting that still has the same crooked art he did on the STEM fair trifold he helped me make in 5th grade. Inside, a spiral notebook I recognized from the cedar chest in his closet. My mother's, the one she used for lists and recipes and sometimes half poems when she thought nobody was looking. On the first page she'd written things to do if I go first, like organizing was the same thing as surviving. There were 7 things listed. 5 were domestic and stupid and perfect. On number 6, she'd written, "Don't martyr yourself. If you love again, it doesn't erase me. Loving isn't a betrayal. Not loving might be." Under in my dad's pen from who knows when, in a different color, a line drawn in the words, "I am trying not to ruin our daughter while trying to take your advice." That sentence ripped me open clean as a good seam and didn't stitch a single thing closed. I drove to the grocery store at midnight and stood in front of the baby aisle because apparently I am the kind of person who makes things worse for herself at inconvenient hours. There was a display of pacifiers shaped like little animals. A green one had frog eyes that made it look surprised. I didn't buy anything. I went home and lay on Brian's couch and stared into the absence where the ceiling fan is when it's dark and listened to my own heartbeat until I could not tell if what I was hearing behind my ear was mine or that fast little woodpecker inside a person I am not done forgiving. I said earlier, in some bravado I thought was control, that if there was a heartbeat I would hear it whether I was in the room or not. I was in the room. I heard it. It's in my head now, this wrong-sized metronome that counts a time signature for a song I did not write and I'm part of anyway. And now I get to sate with the ugly and the holy and the practical elbows of all of it, guarding Lori's sleep at night like we used to at sleepovers when we dared each other to keep our eyes open until dawn, and guarding a little flicker that has nothing to do with any of our sins and everything to do with math and cells and chance and the way hearts, even new ones, can be too loud to ignore.